Dr. Nightechoes. One of the scariest things I ever heard was when I worked in retail. My store used to do layaway, and that was where I worked. Right by the layaway counter, we had 3 bathrooms: a men's multi-stall, a women's multi-stall, and a family bathroom. Well, only the family bathroom had a door that locked. All the others had the push/pull swing door. I was in the back cleaning up and I thought I heard screaming, so I walked out front by the counter. I heard more screaming. I was not sure at first where it was coming from. I ran and checked the men's and women's bathrooms and they were empty, and I still heard the crying and screaming. It was coming from the family bathroom. I banged on the door, but the yelling, screaming, and crying kept going on. It sounded like a child, and I had no idea what was going on. I called for a manager because I had no way of getting in the door since it was locked. This whole time there is still crying, screaming, and banging. After several attempts at trying to open the door, we called 911. We had no idea what was going on, but it didn't sound good. I think about 15 minutes at this point, although it felt like forever. Then the sound checked. It stopped. No more banging, crying, nothing. We banged on the door until the police came. When they finally did, they had to kick the door in since we had no key. As we all stood around and looked in, all we saw was blood all over the place. We were not really sure what happened at first, but the police told us to back up, and that is when they pulled out a lady and a child. A bloody child. Maybe 3. We all just stood there in shock. The child was not moving. We thought he was dead because of all the blood. They took the lady away in handcuffs and the child to the hospital. We all had to give statements. Later, my manager told me what happened. She just snapped. He wouldn't stop crying, and she just had enough and did whatever she could to make him stop. He did live. I was sure he was dead, but he wasn't. She had just knocked him out from hitting him so hard. This story is not scary in the ghost sense, but for that to happen right behind the door and not know what is going on or be able to help was pretty scary to me. I was in Taiwan one year when I was younger and had traveled to a busy night market. Nearby, I spotted a sign for a net cafe in a 5 to 6 story tall building. Thinking I'd fire off some quick emails, I walked into the dark, small entrance of the building. The building was older and not well maintained, but that is not unusual there. The entrance had a narrow hallway that led to a small elevator. I pressed the elevator call button and stepped inside. The elevator looked newer than the rest of the building. There was no 4th floor button. It showed 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. I pressed 6. The elevator started moving quietly. When it stopped, I thought I had reached my floor and began to step out. Right before I stepped out, I saw that the floor outside was completely dark. The only light came from inside the elevator. The place looked abandoned. Old furniture was covered in white cloth. I could see almost the whole floor from where I stood. I checked the floor indicator. None of the numbers were lit, but the 6th floor button was still glowing. Then I noticed a figure moving in the distance. It looked like someone wearing a long gown. The figure was slowly walking toward the elevator. I pressed the closed door button. The lights suddenly flickered off. Everything went black. A second later, the lights came back on and the doors shut. The elevator moved again. When it opened, I was finally on the 6th floor at the Net Cafe. I felt immediate relief. I told the cashier what I saw. She looked pale. She said the building has 6 floors, but the 4th floor had a history. A hair salon worker killed herself there. After that, people reported strange things: red water in sinks, figures in mirrors, Accidents during renovations. The owner removed the fourth floor button from the elevator. It is programmed not to stop there, but sometimes it still does, and people see someone walking in the dark. A few years back, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale, but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45 but looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and asked her to keep it down. She opened her door, and I got a quick peek. Her walls all had crosses painted on them in different colors, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. It was damp, yellow-stained 50-year-old carpets, dog shit and cockroaches everywhere. No dog, though. I asked her to please keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door. Then she turned up the radio even louder. The next night, I had my GF staying over. I wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow of a person next to the bed looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleepy. But then the shadow starts talking. It's my neighbor, and she's holding something in her hand. She broke in during the night, and who knows how long she stood there. "You should lock your door at night," she says and walks out. The next morning, I hear someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbor talking to herself in tongues. She has a plastic bag in her hand with her rotting, dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside and I can smell death from the bag. At this point, I'm scared shitless. She's obviously very insane. I go upstairs and knock on another person's door and ask what the hell is going on. The guy is as scared as me. Apparently, she broke into his apartment one evening as well while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack, only to find her behind the couch staring at him, holding a power drill. At this stage, I'm basically pooping myself. I call the cops and they know all about her. Apparently, she is a violent schizo and she hasn't taken her meds. But they can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it. The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. I sit up for the next 2 days waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops. They have 3 cars and a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her and throw her in the van and drive off to some institution, and in less than a minute, it's like she was never there. I never see her again. Still have nightmares about her looking at me in my sleep. A few months ago, I downloaded a program from my phone called Sleep as Android. I bought the premium version so it could record sounds during the night when the volume reached a certain level. It would activate when I snored or moved around. I usually spent the next evening listening back to the recordings. Everything was normal at first. Just snoring, blankets moving, small noises. Then, one night in early April, something different was recorded. I had the apartment to myself that night. The clip starts with the sound of me snoring. Then I hear it, my doorknob moving. It is slow, careful, like someone is gently trying it. Then I hear my bedroom door open, slowly. Listening to it made the hairs on my neck stand up. I had been asleep the entire time. I do not remember waking up. I do not remember checking the door. The next morning, everything was still locked. The chain on the front door was still latched. No windows were open. No one had keys except me and the landlord, and he did not come. There were no other sounds recorded after that. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. I stopped using the app after that night. My wife and I lived in a townhome that backed up to some woods. One day we both took off work to get yard work done. We were cutting the grass and pulling weeds. Our yard was small. It took 2 full bags of grass to finish. I would walk a few feet into the woods to dump the clippings in a pile. When I went to empty the second bag, something caught my eye. It was deeper in the woods. It looked out of place, and it was moving. I crouched down to get a better look. I froze. At first, I only saw a pair of shoes. They were slowly swaying back and forth. Then I saw the legs, then the body. A teenage boy had hung himself from a tree. A skateboard was leaning against the trunk beside him. I yelled for my wife to call the police. I ran toward him, hoping there was still time. There wasn't. His body was limp. His head hung forward. His dark hair moved slightly in the breeze. The police arrived and cut him down. They worked quickly, then they left. Later we learned he had been struggling at home. He was having problems with his parents. This was the choice he made. It was one of the worst things we have ever seen. That image in the woods has never left us. A group of friends was staying at this remote cabin that one of my friend's cousins owned. There were no roads leading to the cabin, and it was a good 3/4 day hike from where you parked the cars. I couldn't go at the same time as everyone else due to work obligations, so I decided to head up the same day, but later. It would mean I would have to camp for a night by myself, though. The latter part of the trail is too dangerous to be taken at night, especially by someone who doesn't know it. I didn't care. I was kind of looking forward to it as I've never camped alone before. So I was in the middle of these woods when the sun went down. I got my camp set up in this small clearing, probably 40 feet across. Get my campfire going and pitch my small one-person tent. Do all that camping stuff like cooking hot dogs on a stick over the fire and s'mores. I probably stay up for a good 2 or 3 hours after dark. The entire time I thought I heard shit moving in the woods on the edge of the clearing. I didn't think anything of it at first because the woods are full of animals. But as the night went on, I realized that whatever it was just circling the clearing over and over. Once I started paying attention, it made 4 or 5 laps around before I decided to get up and investigate. The noise stopped as soon as I stood up, and I thought I heard some sounds going away through the woods. I just shrugged it off, thinking it was some fox that was curious that got scared when I stood up. I decide it's time to sleep, douse the fire, and climb into my tent. I start to doze off and stay in that half-asleep, half-awake state for a while. I normally hear weird shit when I'm in this state, so I don't think much of it when I hear a voice. Something wakes me all the way up though, and I realize the voice is real and right outside my tent. It's just above a whisper, and I'm not sure if it was another language or if they were just speaking English in such a way that I couldn't understand. I lay there for some time, listening and waiting for something to happen. There is just enough moonlight to light up the walls of the tent, so I can see when a hand presses into the wall of my tent down near my foot. This freaks me out and I sit up quickly. Whoever was outside of the tent tore ass out of there, like running full sprint through the woods. I get out of the tent and shine my flashlight around and see nothing. I was expecting there to be a bloody handprint on the tent, but nope. Didn't sleep that night, packed up camp at first light that morning, and booked it to the cabin. I was playing around with the radio once when I was a kid. I was slowly scanning through the static, trying to find a station. I had found an old television antenna and attached it to the side of our house. I ran a wire out my window and clipped it to the radio antenna so I could pick up more signals. It was early in the morning, around 2 a.m. I was slowly sweeping through frequencies when I suddenly landed on a station playing a strange, crackling sound. It sounded like cracking knuckles, or maybe Rice Krispies cereal, but it had a steady rhythm. It was not random. I listened for a few seconds. Then the crackling stopped. A faint voice came through the speaker. "It doesn't work. We're already dead. were already dead. It took a moment for the words to sink in. When they did, I completely freaked out. I almost threw the radio across the room. I am sure it was probably someone messing around with a radio transmitter. But at that moment, in the dark, at 2 a.m., it scared me more than anything else ever had. I moved into a new house with my wife. We went to see a scary movie called The Sixth Sense. My wife felt very shaky when we came home. We did not have any children yet. She asked me to check every room in the house. She was afraid that someone might be hiding inside. I agreed to look. I walked through all of the bedrooms. I felt a bit silly while doing it. Finally, I went to the guest bathroom. The door was slightly open. I pushed the door all the way open. Suddenly, I heard a terrible sound right next to my head. It was the loudest and most blood-curdling scream I had ever heard. I froze. My heart jumped into my throat. For a moment, I thought something was in the house. Then I realized what happened. It was not a ghost. It was not a killer. Our cat was hiding behind the bathroom door. The cat's tail was stuck in the door jamb. When I pushed the door open, the tail got pinched hard. The cat screamed because it was in pain. It was just an accident. But in that moment, it scared me more than any horror movie ever could. My heart kept racing for a long time. We were both relieved there was no real danger. Still, that scream is something I will never forget. It sounded human. It sounded full of pure terror. Even now, when I walk into a dark room or hear a sudden noise, I think about that night.